Got gardening problems? We've got the answers. Some simple solutions coming up next. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the show. You know, as gardeners, we have a lot of fun and enjoy a lot of bounty from the garden, but it's not without having to face problems from time to time. But rather than refer to them as problems, I like to think of them more as challenges. We're lucky these days because manufacturers are coming up with new solutions for old problems. Take the whole idea of dealing with pests. In today's show, we're going to look at some organic approaches to dealing with pests so you don't have to worry about your children, your family, or your pets. Today we're also going to meet a farmer who transformed his family's dairy farm into a business that produces something a little stronger than milk. And we'll also take a look at why I'm committed to putting more of these up. It's a bluebird box. It's a way to solve problems and add a splash of color into the landscape. Now, who doesn't love a success story? I'm here in Lee, New Hampshire, where an entrepreneur with a passion for innovation has taken the family dairy farm and converted it into a vineyard. What was once producing milk now produces wine and other things, and they're doing it with some real innovation. Frank, the winery is so beautiful. Tell me, when did you decide to move from a dairy farm to creating all these beautiful vineyards?
Well, first off, thank you for recognizing it is beautiful, and we've gone out of our way to do that. Actually, I think it probably goes all the way back to my father when he purchased this 175-acre facility for the whopping price of $6,000.
Really? When was that?
That was back in 1949, and he found the place and fell in love with it and ran it as a dairy from 1949, and I actually grew up on this dairy farm up until about 1965. And I think, like most young people who shoveled manure and did those kind of basic things of life.
I'll never do this again.
I'll never do that, and if I ever see New England again, it'll be too soon. Well, after 26 years in the submarine service, I actually came back here, and my father and mother still lived here, and well, my father said, anybody who wants to run this thing as an agricultural endeavor, they can just have it. Well, my family is pretty much, I'm the youngest of 9, and they said, well, I'll give it a try, and quite frankly, then I said, what the heck can you grow in New England? It's viable. And we looked at all the traditional crops and said, you know, there's just nothing working. And I thought that new term that was buzzing back then was agrotourism.
Yeah.
And we thought that the concept of grapes and the concepts of growing in this region, that would be something that was reasonable to do.
You know, what fascinates me about what you're doing here, Frank, at Flag Hill is that you've integrated some green initiatives into the work here.
Yeah, it seemed like the logical thing to do in New Hampshire, and particularly since we have a still that produces 180 degree water and about 1,000 gallons of it, and not using that water and recovering the heat is kind of foolish. So we employed a system called the Dawn Solar System, which helps us take the byproduct heat from the still, and it heats the building through a piping system in the floor.
Which is very important in the winter here.
Around here it gets downright cold, and that's our primary heat source for the floor. Plus we have another system in the roof structure that actually takes the sunlight and heats the water, and we use it for domestic hot water for our restaurant.
So the radiant heat coming through the metal roof transfers that thermal energy into the water, and you use that to preheat the water.
Preheat the water, and it's an excellent source of domestic hot water, and several other components like that. But end result is we're recovering all of that very expensive fuel. Because think about it, when we started our business here just a year ago or 2 years ago, oil was what, $1.25, and now it's $3.25.
Right.
So if you don't figure out
going up.
Very much, we want to recover that cost, and this is just several initiatives we're taking to, one, stay green, because we spent the money, we might as well use it. Plus, it's just common sense. Good agricultural business in today's market.
Well, it's a real inspiration.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Frank's dramatic transformation of his family's farm is certainly inspiring, and so is this, a nest of bluebird eggs. I'll show you a little transformation out at my farm, sure to add color to the landscape. And a little later, potatoes go from this to this. I've always been a fan of feeding and housing the birds, from the simplest feeder hung outside a window or on a tree branch to ornate and whimsical houses seen in gardens coast to coast. So it was only natural for me to think about housing the birds when I started building my new garden home.
To build a bluebird trail, we're standing in probably one of the ideal habitats. A big open pasture or meadow like this that does not have a lot of insecticides applied to it, away from the tree line, about 100 yards apart. You also want to factor in your maintenance concerns. If you're riding big mowers through here, whoever's doing the mowing needs to be aware that these boxes don't need to be disturbed a whole lot. So if you can put them in a fairly straight line, that's going to make it easier to maintain. If you put your bluebird boxes too close to a tree line, you're going to have some problems with things like flying squirrels. Either southern or northern flying squirrels love to move in and call that home for them. There are other animals like raccoons that would walk along the edge of a forested tree line looking for prey animals, and they'll go in and try to remove the baby birds out of the box. So the farther out you can get from a tree line, the less predators you'll have. When we look at a bluebird box, there's some things you need to factor in. One of them is how easy it is to open and close, because you do need to maintain it and clean it throughout the year. You also want to make sure that it's on a pole, normally about 6 feet, about eye level with you, so you can easily maintain it. An 8-foot galvanized pipe would be great, because you could drive about 2 feet into the ground if the ground's not too rocky. You can put a predator guard, so if a snake or a raccoon would try to climb up the pole, that would block the predator from getting to the box. You want to have good ventilation in the box so it can drain properly. Position of the sun and wind, where the prevailing winds are coming from, you need to factor that in as far as positioning it so it's away from the really strong winds.
Now, if you're interested in attracting birds to your garden, here are a few tips you might want to keep in mind. There's no right or wrong time of the year to begin feeding birds, but once you start, you really need to try to keep it up, because the birds begin to depend on you. Now, if you're not into putting out feeders, especially in the cold, consider planting some plants that birds really love, like hollies, viburnums, possum haw, and even roses that produce hips. Now, hygiene is important when it comes to putting up feeders. You want to make sure that you clean them up before you fill them up with food. And give the birds a fighting chance by putting a bell on domestic cats that might want to play a little too rough with our fine feathered friends. For more tips on birding, visit my website, pallensmith.com. Before we head to a break, here's one more idea for getting color in the garden. Now, this is a plant with a funny name. It's called a Calibrachoa. And now with the introduction of Superbells, home gardeners are going to love this plant because of its disease tolerance and self-cleaning. It's also low-growing and packed with vigorous blooms. Superbells Red is covered in deep red flowers that look great in combination with orange, purple, and golden yellow. Hey, you need to remember there's more color for the garden on the web at pallensmith.com. Of course, if you garden, you know that there can be problems out there, such as weeds, pests, drought, and even allergies. And sometimes the solutions that we find are much simpler than we think, which is such a great thing to discover. Take weeding, for example. Now, one way to cut down on the time you spend pulling weeds is simply by using mulch. You see, mulch is just a layer of material placed between the sun and the soil to keep weed seed from germinating and to help hold valuable moisture in the soil, even on the hottest days of summer. Virtually anything can be used as a mulch. I'm using a shredded pine bark and applying it about 2 to 3 inches thick. Weeding is not one of those activities I like to spend time on in my garden, so I always try to get plenty of mulch in my flower beds. This leaves me more time to do the things I really enjoy. Now, moving from weeds to disease and pests in the garden. These little gnat-like pests will weaken my plants and cut down on their yield. Since I only resort to using synthetic chemicals after using more environmentally friendly methods first, I'm dealing with this infestation with a homemade solution that's sure to be safe on anything I might eat. The recipe for this insecticide is really very simple. I just combine 1 tablespoon of a dishwashing liquid to 1 cup of vegetable oil to make a concentrate. When I'm ready to apply this, I add 1 tablespoon of my concentrate to a cup of water and spray it on the plants. It's important to experiment with this solution first. You may decide to dilute the concentration because you can easily burn your plants. Now, roses are a source of great frustration for some because of a common problem called black spot. This is a fungus that can completely defoliate your plants if it gets a good start and goes unchecked. As the name implies, it starts with a black spot on the leaf. Now, I've never had a rose bush actually die from black spot, but it can certainly cut down on their performance and make the shrubs look pretty shabby. Not all roses are created the same. You see, they respond differently to the fungus, just as we respond differently to viruses. For instance, some of the popular hybrid tea roses are the most susceptible, whereas this old-fashioned rose, Lamarck, which I grow over my tool shed, has been virtually unaffected by black spot. To better control the spread of the disease, start spraying as soon as you see the first spots. And if the problem has advanced, even spray the ground around the plants to kill the spores of the fungus. Now, water is certainly important to the survival and health of plants. And I find that soaker hoses are a great solution for flower beds. And mulching isn't just for keeping weeds down, but it helps to keep moisture closer to the plant's roots. But you know, sometimes it's hard to keep container plants hydrated. Some friends of mine came up with a good do-it-yourself watering system. Here, let me show you. Well, it's really simple. It starts at the house or at the spigot. And there you can attach a timer so you can regulate when the water comes on and the amount of flow. From there, you attach a 1/2-inch line that runs, well, out to where your containers are. In this case, it runs along the deck. From there, you take a smaller line, this size, and you insert it into that 1/2-inch line. This little spaghetti line then feeds directly into the pot through an emitter. And that emitter has a spike on it, which allows you to stick it into the soil so it will stabilize itself and doesn't move around. Now, what's great about the little emitter, you can turn this in such a way that you can regulate the flow of water. It's that simple. And what a great way to take care of your containers throughout the growing season. Okay, now let's take a little time to answer some viewer questions. I have one from Missouri, and Elaine writes, Alan, are there any tips to help make gardening more enjoyable for those of us who suffer from allergies? Well, actually, there are a few tips you might want to keep in mind. First, wear a dust mask, particularly during times of the year when the pollen count is at its highest. Also, spend time in the garden in the mornings and late afternoon, but avoid the height of day when pollen is the most airborne. And wear long-sleeve clothing to cover your skin, but make sure you wash the clothing after gardening with hot water to remove any potential allergens. Of course, as gardeners, we've come to expect a few allergy problems in the great outdoors. But what about indoors?
Though most people would be surprised by this, the air inside your home can be between 2 and 5 times worse than the quality of the air outside your home. Homes are just simply built tighter, which means your home doesn't breathe, outdoor air doesn't get in as easily, indoor air doesn't get out as easily, which also means pollutants don't get out as easily. There are 5 questions that a homeowner wants to ask before investing in that indoor air quality product. Number 1, how much air does that product treat? Number 2, what is the level of that treatment or the efficiency of that treatment? Number 3, what about the performance sustainability of the product? In other words, how long does that level of efficiency last? Number 4, what is the total cost of ownership? How much maintenance is involved in the product? Do you need to have a professional come out every single month or every quarter or twice a year or annually to provide maintenance and a service call? And number 5, ask whether or not the product produces ozone. Ozone in the atmosphere is good. It's what protects us when we're out gardening from the harmful UV rays of the sun. However, when it's at ground level or in your home, it's a known lung irritant. And ultimately, commit to making the air in your home and making your home a better place to breathe.
When we come back, we head to a Delta Delight, a cooking school in Mississippi, next. Welcome back. I'm in Greenwood, Mississippi. This is the Alluvian Hotel, and just across the street, you'll find the spa and the Viking cooking school. We're going to step in and see what Elizabeth Heiskell's doing. She's a chef. She's whipping up something wonderful in the kitchen.
It seems as though everyone has their own opinion about potato salad. Some love mayonnaise, some love mustard. This is one way to solve that problem. This potato salad doesn't have either mayonnaise or mustard. It's a vinaigrette base, and I think it's a really wonderful way to please everyone in your crowd. What we're going to do is start by cubing our potatoes. One of the things I would like to show you, anytime you have a rolling object and a very sharp knife, you can have some problems. So what you want to do is go ahead and make a flat side. That way you've stopped your object from rolling and you can cut much, much easier. While you're quartering these, make sure that all of these are uniform size. That will help to promote even cooking. We're going to go ahead and add these to our bowl that already have the olive oil in them. And then we're just going to salt and pepper. And this is a very important step. Potatoes really need, a good amount of salt. And then we'll shake these. And now these are going to go into our oven that's been preheated at 350 degrees for about 20 minutes. Now we're going to go ahead and start our vinaigrette. We're going to combine 2 teaspoons of balsamic vinegar. We also have a little bit of Dijon mustard, which is going to help keep this emulsification together. Anytime you're making a vinaigrette at home, try to incorporate either a Dijon mustard or a dry mustard, and it will really help the end product. We're also going to add just a little bit of brown sugar, and that's going to really make this a little bit sweeter. And now slowly we're going to add our olive oil. The slower we add this, the smoother and more velvety our vinaigrette will be. And a little bit of our bacon fat. Those that are health conscious, just turn your head for a second. And we're going to add our potatoes. They still have a little bit of crispness to them, which is absolutely wonderful for this recipe. We have thinly sliced red onion. We also have some bacon bits. I believe that was about 10 slices. We have 4 chives. And we also have some beautiful chopped tomatoes. And now we're going to go ahead and add our vinaigrette and pour it slowly just to make sure that everything gets covered. We don't want to lose a bit. And now we're just going to toss this. So as you can see, there's not a person at the picnic that wouldn't absolutely love this dish.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.